The settlement on Kresh 7 wasn't supposed to exist. The Galactic Council had marked the planet as too dangerous, too many apex predators, too volatile, too wild for civilized species. But humanity had never been particularly good at following warnings. Alara Knox sat alone in her research outpost, reviewing xenobiology data under the pale light of the planet's twin moons. She'd been studying the local fauna for 8 months now, particularly the Kreshian stalkers, massive, six-limbed predators that the Council feared more than plasma fire. Most species would sooner abandon a colony world than share it with creatures capable of tearing through reinforced steel. Alara found them fascinating. A soft chirp broke her concentration. She glanced down to find Rune pawing at her boot, his 4 amber eyes blinking up at her with what she'd learned to recognize as concern. The cub was barely 4 months old, still covered in the distinctive silver-blue down that would eventually harden into armor plating. She'd found him orphaned after a territorial dispute between adults had left him alone. And despite every regulation in the book, she'd taken him in. "What is it, little one?" she murmured, reaching down to scratch behind the ridged crest on his head. "It's past your feeding time, I know, but I'm almost." Rune's chirp turned into a low, rumbling growl that made the hair on Alara's neck stand up. She'd never heard him make that sound before. The cub backed away from the door, his body lowering into an instinctive crouch, claws extending from his paws with soft clicks against the metal floor. Alara's hand moved to the plasma pistol at her hip. "Rune, what do you sense?" The settlement's proximity alarm should have answered her question, but it remained silent. That was the first sign something was catastrophically wrong. The second came when her comlink erupted with static, then died completely. Rune released a sharp bark, the danger call she'd observed adult stalkers using, and bolted toward her, grabbing the fabric of her pant leg with his teeth and pulling with surprising strength for something that barely reached her knee. Training overrode confusion. Alara grabbed her emergency pack, keyed the lockdown sequence on her data terminal, and followed the cub as he raced toward the outpost's rear exit. Behind them, the main door exploded inward with a concussive blast that sent shrapnel screaming through the workspace she'd occupied seconds before. Through the smoke emerged shapes Alara recognized from intelligence briefings she'd hoped never to see in person. Vidraxian raiders, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming black in the emergency lighting, weapons raised and scanning for life signs. The Vedrox were slavers, pirates, and worse. They didn't raid council worlds. The retaliation would be swift and overwhelming. But an unsanctioned human research outpost on a forbidden world? That was fair game. No witnesses. No consequences. Alara ran. Rune led her through maintenance tunnels she'd barely known existed, his predatory instincts navigating the darkness with ease. Behind them, she heard the raiders spreading through the outpost, their clicking communication echoing off metal walls. "Good boy," she whispered, her heart hammering. "How did you know?" How did you know? Kreshian stalkers, she'd learned, could sense electromagnetic signatures, a hunting adaptation for detecting the bioelectric fields of prey. Rune must have felt the raiders' equipment long before any human sensor could have detected them. The cub had saved her life. They emerged into the jungle night. Alara's mind raced through options. The nearest human settlement was 300 kilometers away. Her emergency beacon was in the outpost, likely already destroyed. The raiders would have ships, scanning equipment, time. What they didn't have was knowledge of Kresh 7. What they couldn't predict was human stubbornness. Alara looked down at Rune, who gazed back with an intelligence that still surprised her. An idea formed reckless, dangerous, and utterly insane by any rational standard. "Can you call them?" she asked softly. "Can you call your kind?" The cub tilted his head, and for a moment Alara felt foolish. But then Rune's body tensed, his chest swelling, and he released a cry that split the night, a sound somewhere between a roar and a song, carrying across the jungle canopy with primal authority. The jungle fell silent. Then, in the distance, answering calls began to echo. First one, then another, then a chorus that made the ground vibrate. The Kreshian stalkers were apex predators for a reason. Territorial, fierce, and highly intelligent. And Rune, orphaned and adopted by the strange two-legged creature, had just called for help in the presence of invaders. What happened next would become legend in human military academies and nightmare fuel for Vidraxian survivors. The raiders, emerging from the outpost with weapons and scanning equipment, found themselves surrounded by shapes moving through the darkness. Adult Crescian stalkers, each massing over 600 kilograms of muscle, claw, and armored fury. They'd come in response to a cub's distress call, and they'd found intruders. Elara watched from her vantage point as the raiders realized their mistake. They opened fire, plasma bolts lighting up the jungle, but stalkers hunted in packs, moved like liquid shadow, and killed with the efficiency of evolution's finest work. The battle was brief and brutal. When dawn broke over Creche 7, Elara sat with her back against a tree, Ruin curled in her lap, both watching the smoking remains of the raider ship. The adult stalkers had departed, but not before the largest, a scarred female Elara suspected might be. Ruin's mother had approached close enough to touch noses with the cub, then regarded Elara with what she chose to interpret as respect. The council would hear about this. They'd probably sanction her, fine her, demand she leave Creche 7 immediately. But as Ruin chirped softly and pressed against her chest, Elara smiled. Humanity had always thrived in impossible places, bonding with creatures others feared, turning the wild into home. The Galactic Council called Creche 7 too dangerous. Elara called it Tuesday. She scratched behind Ruin's crest and started the long walk back to rebuild her outpost. She had work to do, and now she had proof that humanity's greatest strength wasn't just stubbornness or adaptability. It was the ability to find family in the most unexpected places and turn predators into protectors. The little cub had saved her life. She'd make sure the galaxy knew what that meant.